She was condemned to the electric chair, an instrument of final, irrevocable punishment that loomed ominously on the horizon of her life. The date was set, and the cold, merciless apparatus stood as a stark symbol of her impending demise. Yet, in those last harrowing moments, as the executioners prepared to carry out their grim duty, an extraordinary twist of fate occurred. As she uttered her final words, the air seemed to crackle with an almost palpable tension. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Her last statement was so profoundly poignant and laden with truth that it had the power to halt the entire execution process. Those few, simple words carried with them an emotional weight so immense that it compelled the authorities to momentarily suspend their grim task. Her revelation was not just a fleeting confession, but a seismic shift that threatened to upend everything the world had previously accepted as truth. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation as everyone present was left in stunned silence, grappling with the enormity of what had just been said. Greetings and a warm welcome to this poignant exploration. We invite you to delve deeply into this compelling narrative, to subscribe for ongoing revelations that stir the soul, and to activate notifications so you remain connected to each unfolding chapter. Sarah, a young woman ensnared in a dire predicament, found herself in an abyss where hope was as elusive as freedom, obscured by the heavy shadows of her solitary confinement. Her life had been reduced to a bleak and desolate cell, a stark contrast to the vibrant existence she once knew. Her case had become a spectacle, capturing the collective anguish and fervor of an entire city. The accusations against her were grave. She was alleged to have kidnapped and murdered Emily, a precious 3-year-old who had mysteriously vanished 5 years earlier. Emily, the cherished daughter of Judge John, a prominent and influential figure in the community, had been the focal point of an extensive and highly charged investigation. Sarah was not merely facing the prospect of death, she was also enduring the relentless, unforgiving scrutiny of public opinion, which scrutinized her every action and motive with unyielding intensity. As the possibility of her execution loomed ever closer, Sarah's fate hung in a precarious balance, overshadowed by the weight of both her dire circumstances and the intense public discourse. The city's collective gaze was fixed upon her, each individual grappling with the moral and emotional implications of her trial. In this maelstrom of public judgment and personal despair, Sarah's final moments were marked by a dramatic and unforeseen revelation. The weight of her words had the power to transform not only her fate, but also the very understanding of the tragic narrative that had gripped the city. Her final utterance was a beacon of truth in a sea of darkness, challenging the very fabric of the story that had captivated and divided the community. The media, unrelenting and merciless, launched a full-scale assault on Sarah's character, branding her as guilty long before any official verdict was rendered. The headlines screamed accusations, sensationalized the details of her case, and painted her as the embodiment of society's deepest fears and prejudices. The relentless coverage fostered a climate of hysteria, turning public opinion into a frenzied wave of condemnation. The citizens, consumed by a fervent desire for justice for the tragically lost Emily, viewed Sarah as the living symbol of their darkest nightmares. Their thirst for retribution left no space for empathy or understanding, their judgment hardened by the relentless media frenzy. Amidst this storm of vitriol and hostility, Sarah stood as a figure of enigmatic calm. Her demeanor was a puzzle to everyone around her, including her legal counsel. Her lawyer, perplexed and frustrated by her unyielding silence, struggled to comprehend her reluctance to speak. "Why do you remain silent? Why won't you defend yourself? We could potentially negotiate or at least mitigate your situation if you would cooperate," he implored, his voice tinged with a mixture of desperation and confusion. Yet, Sarah's response was measured, almost haunting in its serenity. "No matter what I say, they have already made their decision," she answered, her voice carrying a resignation that spoke volumes. Her gaze remained fixed on a distant, unremarkable point on the cold, oppressive wall of her cell, her eyes betraying the profound sorrow and solitude she had endured. Despite the monumental gravity of her situation, Sarah's tranquility was a profound reflection of the internal battle she had waged in silence. Her stoic demeanor was far from mere reticence. It was a testament to the years of untold suffering and profound solitude she had endured. Each word she chose to speak, though articulated with deliberate calm, carried the heavy burden of a lifetime's worth of emotional turmoil. Her serene composure, in the face of such an intense and chaotic external environment, only deepened the enigma surrounding her plight. Sarah's quietude stood in stark contrast to the deafening uproar that enveloped her, serving as a striking juxtaposition to the frenzy and judgment clamoring outside her cell. The serene and almost haunting calm she projected seemed to defy the tumultuous storm of public opinion and media frenzy swirling around her. This profound calmness not only heightened the complexity of her situation, but also cast a shadow of tragic irony over her final days. The dissonance between her composed presence and the external chaos created a dramatic and heart-wrenching paradox, intensifying the mystery that surrounded her case. As the world outside clamored for her condemnation, Sarah's unspoken suffering and serene resignation added layers of profound emotional depth to her final moments. Her demeanor became a silent yet powerful testament to the inner torment she had borne alone, making the tragic circumstances of her fate all the more poignant and compelling. Imprisoned and on the cusp of her execution, the 32-year-old woman faced each day with an overwhelming sense of sorrow, yet she carried herself with a dignity that defied the gravity of her grim predicament. At the brink of the electric chair, she resolutely refused to succumb to the all-encompassing shadows of fear and despair. Her unyielding belief that the truth, no matter how hidden or obscure, was her unwavering companion provided her with a semblance of solace. She clung to the notion that this truth, even if it were to be buried with her, was a faithful ally in her final hours. On the eve of her execution, a priest arrived to offer Sarah the opportunity for final confessions, a customary practice for those facing imminent death. Yet for Sarah, this visit was less about spiritual solace and more a stark reminder of her inevitable fate. The priest's inquiry, "Do you wish to confess, my child?" was met with Sarah's response, heavy with resignation. "There are no words that can alter my fate, Father. The truth will die with me," she answered. Her voice, steeped in a somber acceptance, resonated with a poignant blend of defiance and despair, serving as both her shield and her indictment. As the night draped its shadow over the prison walls, Sarah spent her final hours in deep, solitary contemplation. The hours before her cruel destiny were consumed by an intense reflection on the myriad mistakes and choices that had guided her to this fateful juncture. This internal journey, profoundly personal and known only in its entirety to her, was marked by a melancholic resignation. The cold, unfeeling walls of her cell seemed to close in around her, their silent presence a mournful prelude to the end that awaited her. In those last moments, it felt as though everything had come to a close, Sarah thought, her sigh echoing through the stillness. Her life, a complex tapestry of choices and regrets, seemed to unravel in the face of an inescapable end. The quiet, oppressive solitude of her cell became the backdrop to her final reflections, marking the end of a journey fraught with anguish and introspection. Thus, as the first light of her final day crept over the horizon, Sarah faced her fate with a dignity that belied the gravity of her situation. She stood as a figure condemned not only by the legal system but also by the pervasive waves of misunderstanding and fear that had gripped the entire city. Her resolve to confront her impending execution was marked by the same enigmatic calm that had defined her throughout the entire ordeal. This serenity, deeply rooted in her unspoken convictions, seemed almost otherworldly against the backdrop of the grim reality that awaited her. To fully grasp the profound gravity of Sarah's predicament, one must delve into the chilling details of her case, which stretched back 5 long years. The city had been shaken to its core by the shocking revelations surrounding her, and the national outcry had been nothing short of a public spectacle. Sarah was accused of the heinous crime of kidnapping and murdering the precious daughter of a prominent judge. The gravity of the charges against her was amplified by the fact that the child, Emily, was the beloved offspring of Judge John, whose influence and stature added a layer of intensity to the scandal. Sarah's life story, when examined closely, revealed a labyrinthine narrative intertwined with themes of forbidden love, vengeful desires, and a justice system marred by corruption and bias. Her tale was not merely a case of crime and punishment, but a complex tapestry woven with strands of personal betrayal and societal injustice. The accusations against her were not isolated incidents, but rather the culmination of a series of tragic events that had culminated in this final, devastating chapter. As Sarah prepared to face the dawn of her last day, her existence was overshadowed by the complexities and tragedies of her past. The public's perception of her was tainted by the sensationalism and fervor that had surrounded her case, leaving little room for compassion or understanding. Her story, marked by dramatic twists and poignant moments, became a symbol of the broader struggles within a flawed system, offering a sobering reflection on the nature of justice and the consequences of its misapplication. She had leveled a grave accusation against John, the esteemed judge, alleging a clandestine affair between them, an assertion that he fervently denied, fiercely protecting his reputation. This accusation, however, set off a tragic chain of events that unfolded on a fateful day. As Judge John's wife was returning home with their young daughter, Emily, the 3-year-old who was the center of the turmoil, Sarah's actions led to a devastating accident. The incident resulted in the death of the judge's wife and the abduction of Emily. This catastrophic turn of events ignited a public outcry, with the city's collective fury zeroing in on Sarah as the purported architect of this disaster. In the wake of the tragedy, Sarah was apprehended in her own home, a victim of her grim fate. Her trial was a spectacle of condemnation, with the evidence arrayed against her appearing overwhelming and damning. Despite her fervent denials and pleas of innocence, the prevailing sentiment was one of unshakable conviction in her guilt. The court, influenced by the public's fervor for retribution, sentenced her harshly. Sarah was then imprisoned and consigned to a cell for 5 long years, a period of enforced isolation meticulously orchestrated by Judge John himself. This isolation was not merely a physical separation, but a calculated effort to prevent any possibility of empathy or understanding that might arise from interactions with fellow inmates. Sarah's life behind bars was a portrait of profound loneliness and despair. The isolation she endured was not just a geographical confinement, but a deep psychological torment, a reflection of the inescapable fate that loomed over her. Over the years, she came to accept her impending execution with a resignation that was less about peace and more about the weariness of resisting an inevitable end. Her resignation was a surrender to the unrelenting certainty of her fate, a grim acceptance born from the relentless struggle against the forces that sought to end her life. On the eve of her execution, just hours after the priest's visit had offered her no solace, Sarah was subjected to a new and cruel twist to her already bleak reality. John, the very man at the heart of her suffering, appeared in her cell. His presence was a stark and unwelcome intrusion into her final hours. After enduring a barrage of bitter insults from Sarah, John's response was chillingly vengeful. With a sinister smile, he retorted, "I hope you rot in hell just as Emily is now." His words laden with a hatred that seemed to consume him as profoundly as his desire to see her punished. His expression of malice and the cruel irony of his words only added to the torment of her final moments, casting a dark shadow over the end of her tragic journey. Sarah recoiled in sheer shock, her heart pounding as the venom in John's words pierced through her like a jagged knife. For a moment she was frozen, unable to move or speak, her eyes fixed on him as he turned and walked away. The cold promise of their final encounter the next day hung in the air, a grim and menacing threat that intensified her sense of isolation and despair. The incident drove home a cruel reality beyond the immediate terror of her execution. The deepest agony lay in the relentless and uncomprehending hatred of those who had condemned her, a hatred that refused to acknowledge the intricate layers of her plight. The night before her execution stretched endlessly, each minute a harrowing reminder of the looming finality. Sarah lay awake, her mind a turbulent sea of anguish and reflection, replaying John's chilling words about Emily being in hell. The thought gnawed at her, a cruel echo of the judge's malevolent intent. In her solitary vigil, she was consumed by the darkness of her impending fate and the bitterness of her circumstances. The hours dragged on in a nightmarish crawl, the oppressive silence of her cell amplifying her mounting dread and despair. When the dawn of her execution day finally arrived, it came with a brutal clarity. The reality of her fate descended upon her with harsh finality as the guards approached her cell. Her survival instincts surged, and she found herself fighting against the inevitable. Desperation fueled her protests as she pleaded for a reconsideration of her case, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and defiance. "No, he is lying. You have to reopen the case," she cried out, her pleas echoing through the stark corridors of the prison. But her cries were swallowed by the cold, unyielding machinery of a system that had already rendered its verdict. Her frantic demands were drowned out by the indifference of the decisions that had been irrevocably made. The guards, unresponsive to her anguished pleas, led her towards the inevitable, her heart heavy with the weight of an inescapable end. In that final, tragic moment, Sarah was left to grapple with the bitter realization that her fight for justice had been extinguished, overshadowed by the relentless finality of her fate. Dragged towards the execution chamber, Sarah was enveloped by a tense and expectant crowd of witnesses, each one eagerly anticipating either the deliverance of justice or the final, dramatic act of her tragic story. The room thrummed with morbid energy as if the air itself was charged with the gravity of the moment. Whispers of derision floated through the chamber as some spectators murmured, "Finally, you're going to pay," murderer, their voices tinged with a mix of vindication and dark satisfaction. As the executioners prepared the electric chair, the atmosphere grew thick with a palpable blend of anticipation and horror. Sarah could feel the intense weight of every pair of eyes locked onto her, each gaze a mirror reflecting the judgment that had sealed her fate. The palpable tension in the room was a cruel reminder of her isolation in this final, harrowing moment. The cold, clinical preparations for her execution seemed to stretch time into an unbearable crawl, heightening the sense of impending doom that hung over her. When the chamber was finally ready, and amidst the chaotic whirl of emotions and harsh reality, the officer in charge approached her with a question that carried the somber weight of finality. "Do you wish to say your last words?" His voice was steady, but the gravity of the question was unmistakable. Despite the overwhelming fear that gripped her, Sarah managed to reply with a voice that betrayed neither tremor nor hesitation. "Yes, I do, because I have much to reveal." As she spoke, her gaze caught the judge, John, watching from a distance. Even in her profound agony, she noticed the unsettling satisfaction etched onto his face. His smile, cold and triumphant, was a jarring contrast to the gravity of the moment. It was in that fleeting yet potent image of his satisfaction that Sarah found a flicker of unexpected resolve. The judge's cruel display of contentment ignited within her a surge of inner strength, prompting her to summon the courage to reveal a truth she had long kept concealed. The truth she was about to unveil was her last act of defiance and reclamation, a final attempt to reclaim her narrative from the shadows of misunderstanding and malice. As she prepared to speak, her heart pounded fiercely against the constraints of her situation. Each word she uttered was a testament to the profound anguish and desperation that had characterized her tragic journey. In those final moments, Sarah's resolve to speak her truth became a powerful declaration amidst the impending darkness, a final stand against the injustices that had defined her fate. "If you execute me now, you will take the truth about the judge's daughter's disappearance with you. I know where she is because I am her mother. She is alive, and I can prove it. Take that scoundrel's phone," Sarah declared, her voice resonating with newfound strength. Her words sliced through the charged atmosphere like a knife, and the room fell into an astonished silence, every gaze shifting with a mix of disbelief and apprehension toward Judge John. The gravity of her revelation was immediate and profound, forcing Sarah's lawyers to urgently request a halt to the execution. The proceedings were promptly suspended. The enormity of her claim demanded a reassessment. Judge John, initially taken aback by the unexpected turn of events, struggled to maintain his composure. Desperation and irritation flared as he attempted to discredit Sarah's claims. "This woman is delusional. Connect that chair now," he barked, his voice betraying his unease. His command, however, was met with increasing resistance from Sarah. "So, you're implying she isn't residing with her grandparents?" Sarah countered boldly, her challenge causing the judge to falter. His once unshakable facade of confidence began to crack under the pressure of her accusations. Faced with growing doubts and mounting tension, the judge could only accuse Sarah of madness once more before rising to leave. But before he could escape, the police intervened, driven by a newfound sense of urgency in light of Sarah's startling disclosure. An officer stepped forward, addressing John with a firm but respectful tone. "Please, sir, I need you to stay seated and hand over your phone." The officer's request was met with John's fury. "Do you have any idea who you're speaking to? I could have you all arrested," he snapped, his defensive stance only fueling further suspicion. Despite his bluster, the police were resolute. While Sarah was carefully removed from the electric chair, the judge was taken into custody for urgent interrogation. The sudden shift in the narrative sent shockwaves through the world as the media, now in a frenzied state of excitement, began to cover every emerging detail with relentless fervor. What was once considered a closed case was abruptly reopened, its previous conclusions thrown into question. The media and public alike were swept into a whirlwind of speculation and scrutiny, grappling with the new revelations and the possibility of a truth long buried beneath layers of deceit and misjudgment. With the execution halted, Sarah suddenly found herself thrust into the global spotlight, becoming the epicenter of a media frenzy and public intrigue. The world watched with bated breath as the dramatic turn of events unfolded, eager to grasp the reasons behind this unprecedented twist. The interrogation room became a stage for the high-stakes drama, its air thick with tension and anticipation. Sarah, now the focal point of intense scrutiny, was given a crucial platform to share her side of the story, a story steeped in forbidden love, profound betrayal, and a desperate quest for truth that starkly contrasted with the narrative spun by Judge John. In a voice laced with both sorrow and resolve, Sarah began to unravel her narrative. "Emily is the product of a clandestine relationship between John and me," she revealed, her eyes steely with determination. "John, a married man, had promised to leave his infertile wife and build a life with me and our daughter. However, consumed by fear of scandal and driven by a desire to maintain his facade, he orchestrated a horrific deception. Instead of confronting the truth, he chose to eliminate the child and his wife from the public eye, fabricating a story that they had adopted Emily to fill the void left by their inability to have biological children." As Sarah spoke, Judge John's reaction was one of incredulous defiance. "Do you honestly believe I would murder my wife and daughter just to frame you?" he retorted with a mocking laugh, his tone dripping with scorn. "This is preposterous. She's lost her mind. I demand to be released immediately," he insisted, his arrogance masking a palpable undercurrent of fear. Despite his attempts to project confidence, the judge's bravado faltered as the possibility of his dark secrets being exposed loomed ever closer. Sarah's revelation threw the judge's composed exterior into disarray. The truth about Emily's whereabouts remained shrouded in mystery until Sarah's detailed account began to unravel the judge's incriminating actions. In a critical slip of the judge's admissions, Sarah identified key details that illuminated the depth of his guilt. The investigation, now driven by Sarah's courageous disclosures, delved into the murky depths of deceit and concealed truths. The world watched with intense fascination as the layers of the judge's duplicity were peeled back, revealing a shocking narrative that challenged the established version of events and ignited a fervor for justice and retribution. As Sarah's confessions unraveled, authorities launched a thorough investigation that led them to an astonishing discovery: Emily was indeed alive and living with an adoptive family. This family had taken Emily in as part of an arrangement orchestrated by John, the judge, and Sarah's parents. The confirmation of Emily's existence and the details of her adoption sent shockwaves through the legal and media landscapes. The judge's reaction to the revelation was a volatile blend of desperation and fury. The once seemingly unshakable figure now found himself cornered, his carefully constructed facade of integrity crumbling under the weight of undeniable truth. As the depth of his deception was laid bare, John was forced to confront the monumental consequences of his actions. His attempts to safeguard his reputation through deceit had backfired spectacularly, exposing a web of corruption and moral bankruptcy. Sarah's tragic end, though a profound loss, did not eclipse the powerful legacy she left behind. Her story became a poignant symbol of the complexities and failings within the legal system, a system that had, in this instance, been marred by personal vendettas and self-preservation rather than genuine pursuit of justice. The world, stunned and dismayed by the events, grappled with the harsh reality of a legal framework that sometimes prioritizes personal interests over the truth. The public's reflection on Sarah's plight underscored a deeper commentary on the nature of justice and the human cost of systemic failures. Her story highlighted the often hidden injustices faced by those wrongfully accused, stirring a broader conversation about the need for reform and empathy within judicial processes. In her final moments and through her legacy, Sarah became a powerful voice for those who suffer in silence, prompting a global reckoning with the often unforgiving nature of the systems meant to protect and serve. Thank you for joining us on this intense journey through Sarah's harrowing story. Her tragic tale has not only exposed the depths of personal betrayal and systemic failure, but also challenged us to reflect on the harsh realities that often lurk beneath the surface of justice. As we wrap up, we invite you to consider, what have you learned from Sarah's story? How does her experience resonate with your understanding of justice, integrity, and the human condition? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share one key insight you've gained and how you plan to apply it to your life in the comments below. If this video has resonated with you, please take a moment to leave your comment. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue bringing thought-provoking content and deep dives into the complexities of life. Thank you for being part of our community.